can go and get started.
Should I start?
This is pretty much how it's pretty.
Yeah, that's cool.
Dr. Barry Ward is visiting us from University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, talk about the graduate program there and just graduate study in philosophy is like in general. If you get questions about that. And I think we've got a bunch of philosophy of science, either now or in the past, people. Yes, people have taken philosophy. That word's specialty is among the specialties is philosophy of science. So afterwards or dinner tonight, stuff like that as well.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I don't really have a formal presentation plan, and I mean I'm going to talk about, I'll talk about stuff. If you want to stop me or divert me or whatever, please feel free. I know this doesn't have to be divided into me talking and then a discussion section. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess let me just talk briefly just about the basics of the graduate program. So we offer the MA and we offer the PhD. I don't know how familiar you are with graduate studies. Our master's is a 2-year master's. And if you want to do a PhD with us, which I could talk about whether that's a good idea or not, but if you wanted to do a PhD with us, we're an unusual program the way it's structured, which is basically you have to do an MA first, either with us or somebody else, and then you do the PhD. So that's kind of dumb. But anyway, the MA takes 2 years. If you were to do an MA and follow that with a PhD, that'll be like 2 + 3 years typically, so it's a 5-year program. I mean, let me talk about what we try and do. So we've got a faculty of about, I guess, 10 or so regular tenure track professors. We have one teaching assistant professor, Dave Barrett, who actually was an undergrad here a good few years ago and then did his PhD with us. We also have a bunch of other people around the place, like people who are not tenured professors, but have ended up in Fayetteville for one reason or another. So 2 of them are, partners or spouses of recent hires who have their own areas of expertise. They're like early post-PhD people who have their own areas of expertise. So we actually have quite a reasonable range of people, I think, that will cater to quite a lot of interests. So yeah, I mean, I can talk specifically about particular faculty or particular areas of expertise at some point. I mean, let's see. I guess let me talk about the MA program first. If you were to do an MA with us, I mean, this is pretty much the thing that we try and specialize in with regard to graduate education. If you're going to do a PhD in philosophy, I take it you're very likely going to do that because you want to get an academic job. And if you want to get an academic job in philosophy, that's extremely difficult, as it has been for the last several decades. And as far as I can tell, that's getting harder and harder. So being realistic about it, if I have a grad student who comes in who's going to do an MA with us, they really want to, they want to become a professional philosopher, the best thing that we can do for them, I think, is we can provide them with a good quality MA, get them to produce a good writing sample that will hopefully get them into an elite graduate program to do a PhD, because the probability of actually coming out at the end of the process with a job is not great if you don't come out of a place with an elite PhD. So anyway, that's largely what we focus on. We want to give people a good graduate education at the MA level and put them in a position so that if they want to go further with philosophy, they have a good shot at getting into a good PhD program. And I mean, that's something we've been reasonably successful at. We have quite a, so I just meant this to be sort of sent out as an attachment to people, just because it's got a few links. I mean, basically, if you go to the UArk philosophy website, you can find all these links. We have our placement record. We have all the sort of logistical details of the MA and the PhD and applying and what it entails. So, I mean, it's a lot of, anyway, if you really want specific information, feel free to email me, but you can basically find an awful lot of it on the website. Okay, so, yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to think, recently, here are some of the places we placed people at recently. We do have one student who actually is just completing his PhD with us, and he's just got a fellowship at Notre Dame, which is great. I mean, that's very good. He also was in the running for a sort of a postdoc at Princeton, which I'm not saying that's typical of our PhD students. We don't have very many of them. He's performed quite exceptionally, but that's good. We've placed other PhD students at community colleges at quite decent teaching positions. So it's not that it's a really terrible thing to do a PhD with us. We do have some success. It's just it wouldn't be the first choice, I think, for people unless they have attachments in the area or other things that, you know, would constrain them to be here. So I guess the MA, I mean, I can talk about the, you know, what's involved. I mean, there's sort of what's involved in doing the MA, that's one thing. I can talk about the funding that we provide. I don't know if how many of you are from Northwest Arkansas or thereabouts? Nobody. Okay. I can talk a little bit about Fayetteville in the area, which is not a bad area. It's become, I think, considerably more cosmopolitan in the last couple of decades. It's not a bad place to be. I guess let me talk a little bit about our faculty. We've had quite a lot of hires in the last 5 years. So currently we have 3 pretty recent assistant professors. Amanda McMullen is one who does philosophy of language primarily. I mean, her current area of research is she's interested in speech acts, specifically slurs, pejoratives, how these things function, and how they're to be analyzed from a linguistic perspective. We hired a couple of ethicists. So there's a woman, Ashley Purdy, who graduated from or got a PhD at Pitt. She does a lot of virtue ethics, rather, and some other related stuff. We have Jenna Donahue, who again is another recent hire. She's working on moral complicity right now. I can't claim that I'm in any sense expert in what these people are expert in, but anyway, we have quite a good nucleus of people who are doing ethical philosophy, who are starting out in their careers, which means, I mean, ideally people are research active as their career goes forward, but people who are assistant professors, they're, you know, the good thing is they just got out of grad school. They're very connected to what's happening in the field necessarily. And they're pretty active. They're, you know, they have connections to people in other areas, and they're out there promoting their own work, and they're probably in many ways very well equipped to help promote you if you're trying to move along the path of your graduate education. So we have that kind of nucleus of people who do ethics. We've also, there's another guy, Warren Harold, who's been an instructor with us for a long time, who actually specializes in environmental ethics and various other ethical areas. He has a background in economics, like that's what his MA is, and then he's did a PhD in philosophy. So he has quite an interesting set of skills. And he's generally pretty interested in environmental ethics. In terms of, say, ancient philosophy, we just hired Ashley Atwood, who comes from Stanford. She, well, I mean, she wrote a PhD on on Dhyana, rather. She's specifically interested in, you know, ancient conceptions of the mind, but she's considerably broader than that. She has quite a lot of other interests. In terms of early modern, we have Jacob Adler, who specializes in Spinoza, but knows about an awful lot of other stuff too. We have Jeremy Hyman, who's not a professor in the department, but he's taught there in one shape or form for the last 20 odd years, who's a serious Descartes expert. So we have a reasonable sort of complement of people who can teach early modern, for instance. Caleb Reedy, who's Ashley Purdy's spouse, is a Kant expert who's just got his PhD. So, you know, in terms of covering the traditional basis, the historical stuff, I think we're pretty well set up. And then I'm kind of philosophy of science, physics, logic-y stuff, for want of a better term. Eric Funkhauser, who's our department chair, he does a lot of, I mean, he sort of moved over the last couple of decades. I mean, he came out with a sort of a PhD dealing with mental causation and metaphysical issues about the mind, but he's become, well, he became very interested in self-deception, both from an epistemological point of view, but also from a philosophy psychology point of view. And currently he's he's writing a book right now, which I think will be done pretty soon. And he's published a lot of research articles on the idea, which is, you know, an idea that's been current in psychology for quite some time, that belief, you know, may subserve quite different biological functions than merely the representation of the world. So the idea of beliefs as signals, as ways of indicating group membership, and the way in which that can connect to tribalism and to political identity, and attempts to explain, you know, many of the political things that have been really at the forefront of people's minds in the last decade or so. He's working in roughly that area. Tom Senior is a pretty distinguished philosopher of religion and also epistemologist. Richard Lee is retiring. He is an ethicist, but he's leaving. So I guess that's, I'm sure I've omitted a few people. But anyway, I mean, I hope you get a sense. As I say, we've got a decent, I mean, if you're at a really sort of heavy duty graduate school in philosophy, then you would probably have 2 or maybe 3 times the number of faculty that we have. And therefore, if you have really idiosyncratic interests, you will probably be able to find someone who's suitably expert in that. In our case, I mean, there's 10 of us. We all have our own areas of expertise. I think we cover a decent range of bases. So I think we can accommodate anybody who wants to do an MA, but there is a difference between what we can offer and going to Stanford or going to Rutgers or whatever. So this is very handy. I don't know, does anybody want to ask me anything specific or talk about anything in particular? Is there anything you'd like me to develop a bit? I mean, I can talk, say, about, what's involved in doing an MA. I mean, so just in our place. So specifically, I mean, it's a 2-year MA, and what we require is 27 hours of coursework, which is basically 9 courses. And then those are distributed over the 2 years. Typically, the way we do it is this. Our MA students are typically looking for PhD places. And so, when you're basically by the first semester of your second year is when you're going to be formulating your graduate applications or applications for PhD places. And a really crucial part of doing that is producing a nice pithy writing sample, like, a maybe 15 to 20 page piece of writing that shows your philosophical skills and makes it clear that you know how to play the game, for want of a better term. So a lot of the time what we do with students is the first year, they'll take 3 courses each semester. So 3 in the fall, 3 in the spring. And hopefully by the end of the spring and, working through the summer a little bit, they'll have formulated at that point, like who they want to work with and roughly what area they want to work on. And then by the time we get to the fall of the second year, they hit the ground pretty much running and they're in a position to develop the writing sample and to develop the idea that's the central part of the MA thesis. So usually, I mean, people will typically take like 3-3, 1-2. That gives them a lot of time in the fall to do work on the writing sample, which the way philosophy has evolved, it's very pragmatic these days. It's like, people when they write PhDs, it's pretty common in graduate programs that rather than writing, a 250-page single manuscript that might be a book, it's more like, well, you have a portfolio of 3 related papers, 3 or 4 related papers. Similarly, our master's has evolved, at least it's in the process of evolving. I think if you look at the website, it won't be stated there. But essentially, when we want people to write an MA these days, we're like, produce something that looks like a professional paper, a short professional paper, and then produce a lit review that complements it so that, you know the area and you have something that you can produce as a finished product for further applications.
Yeah, when I was finishing it, we did exams and grades, and then dissertation. But those exams and the dissertation were so distinct from each other that they decided the year after I took the exams that there's going to be qualifying papers instead in place of exams. And then those 3 papers could be the project, right? The dissertation project rather than being like a book. So people tend to think of like the dissertation or the final or the master's thesis is like a book, but it sounds like it's more getting you to the point where you can submit it as a useful writing sample.
Very much so. I mean, certainly when I was in grad school, which is 20 plus years ago, yeah, I mean, you could already see the way it was evolving. I mean, so I went to Rutgers when I did my PhD, and I think that place was, I mean, its reputation was already pretty well developed at that point, but they were very much, they were very plugged into what was required to get people jobs. And so, I mean, it's, certainly I've seen people where, they produce a paper that is publishable and something that kind of shop around the place and shows that they're professionally accomplished, shall we say. And the PhD, frankly, was almost an afterthought, because really what it was all about was about the job market, which I'm not saying is necessarily a great development in the field, but it's understandable given the pressures people are under. Yeah, so I mean, actually, when it comes down to for our PhD, the requirements have become very much streamlined. There used to be a foreign language requirement. There is no longer a foreign language requirement. There used to be a set of 4 different kind of qualifying exams, which would have explored different areas of philosophy. Now what it really is, it's very much attuned to the production of the final dissertation. So, essentially what you do is you do a qualifying exam in the broad area that you want to do your PhD in. So a sort of something like, have you read this, like, we'll give you a big comprehensive reading list. and then we'll give you some questions on it. You have to write papers on each of the questions. And then after that, you provide a prospectus, which is essentially your plan of your PhD thesis. And then you defend that. And after that, basically it's on to writing the thesis. It's fairly streamlined.
In the first year, when you're doing, students do 3-3, are they kind of exploring what their area of interest is?
Yeah, very much so.
Are set up, so they're.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, typically I would say most of our graduate students don't come in with a sort of a preset idea of what they're going to work on. And so yeah, we very much want them to to interact with people and find what they find interesting. We used to, I mean, yeah, we do have some distribution requirements. I mean, but I don't know if that's really salient to people finding their feet. So I mean, there is a graduate qualifying exam. I mean, there's a graduate course in symbolic logic, which is required for everybody, which is kind of standard. And then we used to have very stringent kind of history requirements. We sort of walked that back a bit and we're like, okay, you got to do at least one history graduate level course. You have to do something in metaphysics and epistemology, which frankly is almost completely unavoidable. Like anything, if you do a philosophy of science class, well, that'll qualify as epistemology, and maybe, but so that requirement, I don't know how you would avoid meeting that requirement. And then we have a value theory requirement, so that's just do something ethics and/or aesthetics or whatever, something like that. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I guess the first year typically that is exploratory very much. We want people to do, find who they find interesting and what work they find interesting. Yeah, so I mean, I guess maybe I could talk a little. I mean, as I say, I'm really open. I feel this is really quite dull what I'm saying, but it is informative. I hope. But I mean, I guess I could talk a little bit about what it's like. I mean, really. I guess one thing is, I mean, we do, I mean, basically students, when we accept a student to the program, unless they're independently wealthy and slightly insane, they are accepted on the, like we offer them a funding. People very rarely come to our program and say, I just want to study philosophy and I have arbitrary amounts of money to throw at this, so I don't care about getting a tuition waiver. We do get occasional people like that, and that's fine. But generally speaking, our incoming grad students are all people who we fund. So just a brief thing about the funding. If you are an MA or a PhD student, you get a full tuition waiver for the years you're there. So you don't have to pay fees. In addition, you'll be a teaching assistant. We try and be pretty proactive about that. We don't want to just dump people in the classroom, and also just training people to teach if they do intend to pursue the career is obviously an important thing to do. So I mean, typically when people come in the first year of the MA, they will literally be teaching assistants. So we have large sections of intro to philosophy with a professor who'll be teaching those, and then we have say 4 teaching assistants, each of whom will be responsible for 3 recitation sections. And so they'll be responsible. This is a pretty standard format in a lot of large schools. You've got like a class of a couple of hundred undergrads, and then there are like 2 main lectures that happen in the week. And then on the Friday, say, you have all these recitation sections going on where the idea is that the TA discusses the material with the students. And there's a certain amount, I mean, as I say, we want this to be an apprenticeship. And so there's both interaction with the professor who's teaching it in terms of constructing assignments and learning how to, I mean, it's a non-trivial amount of work. I mean, these guys will know, you may not know, but grading large amounts of papers or, grading assignments, the workload involved in that when you have to do it, I mean, can be really quite horrific. And so one thing you want to do, I mean, I'm not so much talking about papers. A paper is a paper, you write your 5-page paper or whatever as an undergrad. But yeah, one of the things that, we try to help people with is just, how not to construct assignments that will kill you with 40 hours of grading work, and, how to construct it in such a way that it is, genuinely testing of the student's understanding and promotes understanding by doing it, but not in such a way that it's so hideously labor intensive for the TA or for the instructor that it's just prohibitive to make assignments like that. So we try to do, and we'll observe people teach. Everybody gets observed, and we'll give them notes and all that kind of stuff. So as I say, we try and be proactive about that. It's not that you're just cast adrift. So the first year, typically people are teaching assistants in the real sense of the term. Typically in the second year, I mean, if they want to remain teaching assistants, that may be an option, but typically we'll give people their own courses. And again, there'll be a faculty advisor assigned to you who is supposed to interact with you when you're constructing your syllabus and, you know, pretty much informally throughout the semester, and who'll observe you teaching as well. In terms of the actual, like, as I say, you know, I think it's really important you're not just casting people adrift. You know, we try at the sort of research level, we do try to, I'm not sure, I mean, well, I'll use it, we try to professionalize our grad students. I mean, that's the only rational thing to do if they do want to go through. So, I mean, the thing we try to do is, you know, an ideal kind of thing that, you know, often we'll do in seminars is, you know, sometimes you get people to just write a 15-page paper as the final term paper. But one of our professors recently, for instance, did something like this, where she said, look, you know, what I want you to do for the seminar is to essentially write a conference paper. And the idea will be that at the end of it, we'll send them, you know, hopefully we'll send them to conferences. So a conference paper is typically like 3,000 words, you know, 10 pages, something like that. And, you know, there is a genuine discipline to learning how, like, you know, what size problem can I address in a paper of this size? You know, how can I set this up so that I can get it, you know, so that it'll be refereed to get to the conference and it'll have a good shot at getting accepted. And then, you know, that's what we like to do. We want to get people out there so they can go to conferences. So you get the experience of presenting, you get the experience of fielding questions, and hopefully, you know, you might make some connections. You know, you might find friends with other grad students. You might, you know, if there are faculty there from other colleges who are working in similar areas, you may have productive kind of conversations with them. So with that in mind, I mean, we've tried to sort of, Northwest Arkansas is much less isolated than it used to be, but it's still quite isolated. Though the airport now, you know, we've pretty much direct flights to a lot of major cities, which is nice. But, you know, we have more money than we used to have, like, without getting overexcited. So, you know, I mean, let's not get crazy. It's not, but, you know, we have, minimally, we can provide you like $700 for travel if you're going to go to the conference. And often that's not a huge amount of money, as I'm sure you know, if you want to get the plane flight and the hotel and all that stuff. But often, like, we have additional money in, you know, not exactly a slush fund, but we have additional money that's sort of available to us now and has been available to us for quite a few, you know, maybe 5 years now. And there's no reason to expect that's going to dry up. So typically we can top up if people want to go to conferences. 700 is not going to cover everything, very likely. We can often top up, and we very much encourage people to get out. We did, I mean, we've had some good stuff. I mean, one of our students went to a conference in Lithuania. I mean, I'm not sure that was the most elite academic conference. Maybe it was, I don't know, but we were very pleased we could actually support her so that she could actually go to Lithuania. But yeah, we have a, you know, pretty good active kind of thing going on with our grad students, getting out in the world and, you know, progressing in that way professionally. Because, you know, until you do these things, I think until you write your conference paper and you get out and you present it, well, I think it's good because it focuses people's minds. I mean, I like nothing better, frankly, from a philosophical point of view, than kind of sitting in my office, kind of playing with ideas that interest me and trying to find stuff that connects in interesting ways and hopefully, you know, crystallize it into something that is interesting or productive. But there is, at the end of the day, the imperative to convert that into something that people in your field can read and comprehend and think is worth interacting with. And so it is, and it's a process. I mean, I think it varies for different people, but I know for me at various stages in my education, I mean, I think I'm a pretty particular person, but it kind of shocked me, the gap between what I thought was like, oh, this is really clearly expressed, and what my philosophical readers thought of what I thought I had really clearly expressed. And, you know, that's an ongoing process, you know, it's like, but I think it's really important to help people to get on that first step, you know, just to say, look, on the one hand, doing research can be quite intimidating. I think it's intimidating to sort of go out there and really try and make something that is substantive of your own. And I think perhaps the best thing to do is, rather than leaving people agonizing or stewing over it, if you can, you know, set up small incremental tasks that can be that can move you further along and give you kind of practical skills. That's certainly the kind of thing we like to do. I mean, other things we do every 2 years, we have a graduate conference that we host. Again, that's kind of money that comes from our slush fund or whatever, that helps. We can typically, heavily subsidize people coming in for the conference. We typically have, I would say, I mean, each semester we probably have 3, maybe 4, fairly, serious philosophers from other places. I mean, Richard Moran just came through from Harvard, a couple of weeks ago, or last week actually. We do have a pretty decent through flow of people. So, and that again is good. You can do the sociable thing. You go to the talk, you have a chat, you go for dinner afterwards. It's a good thing to do. Let's see. Okay, so I think, again, do stop me. I guess let me talk a little bit about brass tax stuff. I mean, money. Our graduate stipends have improved. I'm not going to pretend they're stellar. So, I mean, our MA students, you're a TA, you'll get like $16,000. Fayetteville, by comparison with many places in the United States, has a comparatively low cost of living, but the fact is property values have gone like flat in the last 20, 25 years. And commensurately, rents are not, at least they're vastly greater than they used to be. So I'm not going to pretend it's a picnic financially in terms of what we can provide you. So as I say, you get the tuition waiver or tuition remission. You'll get, $16,000. That may go up. We've just been told that our PhD student stipend, which they were always identical, but for some reason they've raised, the PhD went to $71,000, and we don't know what's happening to the MA stipend, but there may be some modest increment there for the full. Yeah, for PhD students, I mean, I appreciate that's not really an issue at this stage since, you're still doing your undergraduate, but for PhD students, we do have these what are called doctoral academy fellowships, which if you get one of those, and I think philosophy students, grad students we have pretty good track record on that. Then you'll get funding for 4 years, like for the PhD for 4 years, and funding that all told is about in the mid-20s for each of those 4 years. So that's considerably improved. Yeah, I mean, I guess what I was going to say, I mean, just to try and give you a sense of our department, as I say, I worry a little bit that the way I've characterized this is, I guess, maybe a legacy of my own experience in grad school, and also of what you see around yourself in the academic landscape. It's like, yes, the academic world, trying to get a job or is very challenging, and so there is a tendency, which on the one hand it's a good thing because you need to equip people for what they're going into, if that's what they're going into. But on the other hand, it maybe moves a bit away from the nice ideal of an academic life as a life of thought, which is not particularly fettered by, kind of brutal practical considerations. But, on the one hand, so I feel like I've kind of emphasized, we try to professionalize our grad students. We very much want them, if they do want to pursue philosophy at a more advanced level, we very much, I mean, obviously it's imperative that we do for them what we know is necessary for them to get their foot in the door at some good place where they can learn an awful lot more. But on the other hand, I mean, our department really, it's just at a social level, it's a pretty relaxed place. I mean, I will say there aren't, we're not a toxic department. In fact, we're very far from that. There really aren't problem personalities. People are generally pretty informal and relaxed, as befits Arkansas. People are just kind of pretty relaxed and friendly. I think generally speaking, it's not, okay, so I guess maybe I don't know if that's my spiel. There's probably other things I could have thought to say, but if you guys want to, I don't know, raise anything or discuss anything, please.
What the size? What would be the size of the cohort? The 2 or 3 year group of students that would be taking the classwork together?
Oh yeah. So I mean, basically, like this year, for instance, we will be taking in 6 new grad students. So we're in the middle of that process right now, and I would say that's about typically each year we'll say we'll take in 6 new probably MA students. So yeah, there'll be like 12 or more people sort of percolating around the various courses that we have. We have a few, yeah. I mean, so both the MA students and the PhD students, have pretty much the same load of coursework they have to do at the start of their respective programs. So there'll be a handful of PhD students who will also be taking courses. But that's a pretty modest number of people. I mean, also, I mean, I don't know that this really affects you as a grad student. So, I mean, on the one hand, we have graduate seminars, and everyone of the 9 courses you take, 3 of them have to be graduate seminars. I mean, what distinguishes the seminar, I'm sure you have seminars here, is pretty much like the responsibility on you is considerably greater. You know, you're reading journal articles typically as your, you know, as your main source of discussion material for the course. And the expectation is that people read it and they're, you know, they're ready to talk when you come to the seminar. It's far more and you know, just a scholarly discussion of the kind you have with colleagues. But in addition to that, I guess a large number of our graduate courses, other than the seminars, they're kind of split advanced level undergraduate and graduate student courses. So for instance, the formal logic course that I teach, which is not really typical of philosophy courses, because it is pretty math oriented. Yeah, so you'll have a bunch of philosophy grad students, you'll have some math grad students, some computer science people, and you'll have a whole bunch of undergrads who may be philosophy majors or maybe in other areas. And a lot of our courses are like that. So I mean, we've quite a substantial number of philosophy majors as well. And so I mean, there's reasonable interaction there as well.
One thing that I was surprised by when I went to grad school was that for a course you wrote 1 paper, and that was like what determined your grade. So you said that's usually the way it is, right? Because I think, you know, we'll have like 3 papers in undergrad, an exam, multiple exams, or multiple papers, or but I mean, I think there's you know, a greater responsibility in a sense. It's important to take on as you're looking to. The law stands or falls with getting this published, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest though, I think actually, so in the seminar, yeah, it's not unusual for people to say, yeah, your paper, like you're going to write this paper at the end of the seminar, and hopefully it'll be really good. And that's really, but I mean, when I teach a seminar, and I think people have different, you know, different approaches. I mean, I would typically, I mean, there'll be like, everybody will have to do a presentation. That presentation may coincide with the topic of their final paper. It often does. But I mean, personally, I just kind of, I like to give everybody like a 5-page paper when we're, you know, a month and a half into the seminar, just because if there are issues about their writing or their philosophical approach, I want them to do something small and, you know, clean, so I can kind of get an assessment of where they're at. And that way, yeah, and maybe I'll grade hard on that, but the idea is that when you come to the main paper, whatever problems there were there, hopefully you've had some time to think about. Yeah, the sort of mixed undergrad, grad level courses, those are typically, I think, more like what you were saying, where the grade is distributed like across. There may be a midterm, a final, there may be a paper or 2 or various assignments. I think that's pretty standard for a lot of our courses, even at the graduate level. Oh, sure.
Could you speak a little bit more about like the logic courses in philosophy of science?
So in the logic course, I mean, I teach the sort of graduate requirement logic course, which, and this is, I think, typical of any philosophy department. You can go to Princeton, you will find that some philosophers are mathematicians. Most of them aren't, or at least, you know, it's all 50-50. There's some people who are like, yeah, this is not a big deal, this is okay. And there are people who are like, why are you crucifying me? So, I mean, you know, I believe me, I think I do what every, I don't know if you really want to hear about my grading structure, but I do what I think everybody who teaches graduate logic, which is a requirement in philosophy departments, do. I mean, on the one hand, I try and do stuff that I think will be helpful to people. So I'll do a certain amount of stuff on computing machines. I mean, not super fancy, but you know, stuff that might be of use to you in a philosophy of psychology class or something like that. And I'll do a little bit of modal logic because, I mean, I don't know, maybe the formal stuff is not so, I mean, it's still clearly present in the field in the sense there's people doing formal epistemology and all this stuff. And in many ways, these are somewhat fashionable happening areas, but I think a lot of philosophy is seems to be moving away from, 20 years ago, when the coolest thing in the world to be was like a fancy metaphysician, I think that's not quite as fashionable as it used to be. So, I mean, the logic that I teach, I mean, basically what I'll do is I'll teach propositional logic, quantificational logic. I'll teach a certain amount of meta theory. I try and do it in an incremental way. I basically, what I say to the people who are going to struggle deeply is like, look, you stick with me, you attempt the 8 problem sets, you give them all an honest attempt, and I promise you, you'll do fine. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes, I don't know if you're particularly interested in doing like advanced logic. I mean, one of the people who's currently in our department he's the partner of Ashley Atwood, who's our ancient philosopher, but he's a real logician and a real philosophy of logic guy. So, I mean, he's around. He's not teaching any advanced courses for us right now, but he certainly he has the knowledge, and you know, people, as I say, are pretty friendly. So yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's kind of funny. Like, I get a lot of computer science students and math students because they don't really have people who teach. So anyway, I will teach, as I say, quantificational logic. I'll go up. I won't go quite as far as like Gödel's incompleteness theorem or stuff like that, but I get into a little bit into that neck of the woods without going too crazy. I have occasionally taught like a more serious course about Gödel and stuff like that, but anytime I've taught that, which has been maybe 3 times, I think I've had about 5 students, and it's not really a big thing. Philosophy of science, yeah. So I mean, I personally have a background in physics, so I mean, I teach at the advanced undergrad level. I mean, right now I'm teaching a course on quantum mechanics and the measurement problem, which is something that I teach fairly frequently because there's quite a lot of uptake. I mean, both from philosophers and from people who are more physics and math. I mean, I'm on the one hand, I want the course to be rigorous, and I think it's reasonably rigorous, but it also has to be largely non-mathematical for the purposes of 50% of the class there. And that I think works out reasonably well. I also teach some philosophy of space and time kind of stuff. And then I teach more mainstream philosophy of science, which, depending on how you attack it, you know, you start out with logical positivism and you work your way through the 20th century, and you talk about exclamation, and you talk about, you know, various sort of what people call special sciences, you know, psychology, various other things. And so that's the kind of stuff that I would cover.
It's a social phenomenon. Graduate school as a social phenomenon. I've been, either personally or people I've known, sort of run the gamut where graduate school was not that much different than undergraduate. You had class at the regular time periods twice a week, Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday. The professor was Dr. So-and-so, Professor so-and-so, and then the other stream, we met once a week for 2 hours at the professor's house, and we called him Steve. Yeah.
You can definitely call your professor Steve in our department. It may be that you could meet at someone's house. I don't think that's typical, but it's not like there's some profound reason that doesn't happen. I mean, we do, you know, we have sort of mixers and, you know, gatherings of one kind or another, you know, a few times a year. So in that regard, it's pretty convivial. But yeah, I mean, the classes will typically happen on campus in classrooms and seminar rooms. It's and I mean, the University of Arkansas is not a bad place to be. I mean, the general countryside is quite, you know, quite pleasant, and it's a nice area to live. But this feels a lot more balmy and leafy. Yeah. This feels far more like you'd sort of go to someone's house and just hang out for yourself. And of course, you've got your farm. Yeah, we have nothing to compare to that. So what can I say?
Yeah, I think the 1 day a week thing was also a surprise to me, because our classes were 3 times a week or twice a week, and just showing up for, it was 3 hours.
Yeah,
1 day a week, and that being like the meeting.
You know, it was more of an event.
Yeah, no, when I was in grad school, actually, I mean, all the graduate courses were seminar courses, so they were exactly like that. You'd have one meeting a week, and it would be multiple hours, and potentially quite painful. But if you do our seminars, it certainly has that character. Like your seminar is that kind of multi-hour phenomenon once a week. A lot of the courses we do are more, they're, as I say, they cater both to advanced undergrads and to the grad students. So those are pretty conventional. It's like 3 times a week for 50 minutes or twice a week for an hour and 20. That's the kind of standard format. If I teach, say, the advanced undergrad / grad level philosophy of science, I mean, one thing that I'll typically do, this is just informal, but it's like, we'll, the grad students and the undergrads will cover the same basic readings, but then we'll meet like either once a week or once every 2 weeks. And I will meet the grad students collectively like once every week or once every 2 weeks, and I'll have given them a few papers to read that, take it up a notch, and we can have a more sophisticated discussion about the material.
I'm just curious about the teacher assistant part of it. Like, so the first year, you said like 2 days out of it, you'll like be observing or something, the teacher teach, and then 1 day you'll be leading.
Yeah, so I mean, typically the way it works is that the professor for the course will we'll basically lecture to a room of a couple of hundred people. And they'll do that twice a week. So that will be kind of laying out, here's what we're talking about. I mean, there may be, depending on how people do it themselves, there may be a decent amount of interaction with the students in the large lecture theater, but it's more common that they're like, well, I got a certain amount of material I'm going to get through, and that's what I'm going to do. And then the reason we have the grad students attend that is just so they know what's going on. Like, they know what kind of stuff the professor is making salient, and they probably can get a kind of sense from the temperature of the room of what stuff's, potentially problematic for the undergrads. And then, as I say, on the Friday, typically, you'll have maybe 3 sessions of, I'd say 50 minutes a piece, I think it's the standard thing, where you'll have like 15 students out of that class. And the idea is that that's much more interactive and one-on-one. Yes.
Yeah, it's like there's no way you're doing it to like 100 people.
Well, I mean, sometimes I haven't taught any of the big classes myself in a while, but I mean, for people who wanted to, I would happily, I would say, hey, is there some like area we're covering here that you'd really like, you feel like you'd like to wet your feet, like teaching a big class? And when people, I mean, I wouldn't compel anyone to do it, but when people say, I wouldn't mind doing that, it's worked out pretty well.
What's the difference between 100 people and 30 people? I mean, once you're in front of 30 people, you're in front of a good number of people.
There's a certain level, right, where it's just.
I mean, it's 70 people, right? And that's a big number compared to 30, but still, I mean, I think once I've talked in front of 100 people, and I wasn't like more scared because they're people, right?
Yeah,
Who is there matters. My experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, like the only considerations that really matter to me, I guess, if I'm teaching philosophy is like, well, if you got 100+ people, you probably are going to have to structure that as a lecture. You may have a bit of discussion, but you're just going to have to, there's certain content you're going to have to get through, and it's not the right number for a real interactive thing. But then if you have like 5 people in the room, unless they're really pumped to be there, you may have difficulty getting the kind of level of discussion that you want. So like 15, 20, 25, I think that's the sweet spot for discussion, I find.
Yeah, I'm trying to teach. I taught philosophy of AI once for 40 people. That was very hard to have here. It's very hard to have discussion. But that was, the I had classes with 50 at Marist College. I think ethical theory with 50 people. And that's kind of hard. You can't really have a discussion. You can have people raise their hand and ask questions.
Yeah.
About like, what does this really mean? What kind of questions, but not really conversation.
Actually, when you mentioned philosophy of AI, I mean, one thing that it's sort of a function of our research interests of our faculty, but also kind of where we're trying to go. Well, we potentially have a new hire to replace Richard Lee. He's retiring at the end of this year. But we kind of got a free hire like a year ago where we got to convert a a visiting assistant professor position into a tenure line. So we have a suspicion the university may say, no, you got enough people, we're not going to give you another faculty line. But what we were thinking of doing, it may still come to pass, but we were thinking we'd like to get someone in an AI related field. I mean, it could be ethics related stuff, or it could be more mind, logic kind of stuff. I don't know if that's going to come to pass, but there is. So Gemma Donahue, who's one of our recent ethical hires, she's interested in ethics, AI related stuff. And Dave Barron, actually, who's our teaching assistant professor right now, he developed and has been teaching for the last few years a data ethics course that he actually teaches. Like, we have a data science program, which it's not a department, but it's like between computer science and engineering, and I think the business school, perhaps. I think they all have their fingers in there. But we are responsible for the data ethics course, and so Dave is, on the one hand, he's been teaching that for a little while now, and he's pretty motivated by that. But he's starting to do some research in that area as well. So,
yeah, some of, you're mentioning getting a job, going job market, job placement. Some of that's also just circumstances or situations, right? Like now, this year, if you look at the jobs that are available, tons of philosophy of AI, like fill jobs is just filled. It's because people think it's an existential risk. They're very concerned about it, and a bunch of universities or provosts have it on their mind because they're seeing students cheat with ChatGPT, right? So they're like, clearly we need an AI ethicist, but that's overwhelmingly what they are. And that wasn't what it was when it was 13 years ago. There were a lot of Latin American philosophy or indigenous philosophy, right? And that was a lot of what people were hiring. But that's not in the mix now, right? So there's a sort of like, in a sense, preparing people for these situational or contextual things can get a little tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, as you say, it's out there. You just have to look at jobs for philosophers, and it's just quite astonishing. And I will admit there was a certain, I hesitate to say cynical, but there was a certain pragmatic attitude where we were like, well, we know we're not guaranteed to get this line, and we know we've met the dean, we have a new dean who's a mathematician, we know he really digs all this stuff. And so we were like, well, if we do an AI pitch, that's probably the best pitch we can do. So yeah. We'd be really happy to have someone like that. It'd be good for our students. That would be great. But we're not insensitive to the idea that it might be attractive to the dean also.
I mean, there's certain kinds of areas that can work that will always be respected, right?
Yeah.
I do ethics probably, do metaphysics probably, epistemology probably, history in a sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, so when I talked about our rather flimsy distribution requirements, when I say flimsy, I don't mean to, it's not a joke, but it's not hard to fulfill our distribution requirements. But I mean, really, I think the way I think about it, and I think a lot of people think about it, is like, yeah, if you're going to be a philosopher and you're trying to think about, how do I take my work, which may ultimately be in quite a narrowly specialized area. Most people in my field will not be remotely directly employed with, how do I develop the skills so that I can communicate effectively with other people? I mean, I think a certain background in history of philosophy is really valuable there. If you want to talk about fundamental problems in epistemology or fundamental problems about the mind or whatever, there will be correlates of those ideas that you will find in Plato or Aristotle or in Descartes or in Hume or whatever. And so as I say, I think the thing that we're best at is to give people a good MA where we kind of take them from okay, you're an undergrad, but you haven't kind of gone that extra mile, where we try and make them that bit more philosophically sophisticated. So get the grounding in history of philosophy, if you don't already have that from the undergrad level. And then just, try and give people, really, I think grad school in large part is about developing the toolbox so that, whatever you do, there's probably going to be a metaphysical dimension to it, unless it's ethics maybe, but, there'll probably be an epistemological dimension. So you just want to, give people a good, like, here, here's a good survey of epistemology to take with you. Here's a good survey of metaphysics. Here's a good survey of mind. I mean, those kinds of courses are the kinds of courses we tend to offer in addition to the seminars, which may be more specialized in some of those areas.
I guess I wonder. Hendrik says the college or class sizes are small. Most of them are 20 or below. As far as the major courses. So, and I think we have, it has a liberal arts college folks on right. For the most part, broadly speaking. But that's definitely something that students get. So I guess I wonder, what does doing philosophy like at a liberal arts college, how does that map on to doing philosophy at U of A in the graduate program, right? Are there certain kinds of small class size, one mentoring, focused on the writing sort of skills that are going to be easy for students to then, okay, now I'm plugged in this new environment. Here's how to use those skills.
I mean, I will say our class size, I mean, the grad seminars, for instance, so we offer, typically we'll offer 3 grad seminars in a given academic year. So 2 one semester and 1 the other semester. Yeah, I mean, those are modest sized. I mean, in the sense like it's, 5 to 10 people. So that would be the kind of grouping you'd have. We did think, and then even the advanced undergrad grad classes, I mean, some of those are actually quite big. So sometimes, I mean, when I say big, they're capped at 30.
Yeah.
But an awful lot of them are like 15 to 20 people. So I think they're pretty decent sizes of people to have for appropriate discussion. We did have a conversation. I mean, the curriculum committee, we were having some retooling some of the stuff we're doing. We did have a conversation about having a kind of writing focused pro seminar. But I guess we thought ultimately that we didn't really want to eat up. It would probably be kind of team taught, like sequentially, like I'd take a couple of weeks, someone else take a couple of weeks or whatever, like to really focus on writing. But to be honest, I think that the seminars and the graduate classes, there's already a pretty heavy writing focus. And so if all's going well, I mean, we hope that takes care of that. I think, generally speaking, I think our students produce well-written stuff. I think they do pretty well. Yeah, and I mean, at the level of individual professors, I mean, everyone's got their office hours. It kind of varies from person to person. There's quite a number of people who are pretty much there on a daily basis. I mean, that's where I like to work. So I'm happy to sit in my office and do my stuff, and I'm pretty happy to talk to people. So at that level, I mean, I have official office hours, but it's as I say, it's not hard to find me if you want to talk about something or work on something. And I think there's a fair number of people in our department who are like that. Some people understandably are more like, no, I've got these designated office hours and you can come talk to me then. But also it's, there's good accessibility.
I remember thinking it's not just as a matter of survival. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Graduate school. What a big important thing for me was the others that were in it with me. If I were going it alone, I probably could help myself quitting. But there was this group of us who had the classes together, but then we're also together outside the class. So it was not even intentionally supported, it just worked out. We supported each other.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, from my perspective, I think generally speaking, like people get on well with each other. I think the grad students are good. They do provide that. I mean, I went to a larger grad school than Arkansas, but I mean, I know for myself, like intellectually, my development, I think, I'm not saying a lot of it did happen with my professors and it did happen in the classroom or in discussion with them, but an awful lot of other stuff just happened with kind of informal conversations with lots of people who were at grad school with you. And frankly, that was the most entertaining part of it. It was fun. So we don't have 30, 50 grad students knocking around the place. But you know, there's about 15, I'd say, and a few others drifting in and out. Then, as I say, the faculty, I mean, when I was at grad school, I think a lot of the faculty lived in disparate areas, so they were around, but they weren't always around. Whereas, you know, Fayetteville's not that big. We're typically around the place too.
Mhm.
Something else you need to know. The real truth about graduate school.
Well, we've had these delightful flyers if anybody wants to take them. And as I say, if you want to just check out our website, I mean, stuff about placement, like, you know, what you can get some sense of what people have worked on. Like we'll have a listing of the MA theses that were defended each year and where those people went. And then you can look at the people who've done PhDs and where they ultimately got placed. So if you want that kind of information, and, you know, feel free to email me, or, I mean, I'm the grad director, so I guess I am the person to email, but, you know, Eric Funkhauser, who's our department chair, or anybody else for that matter, if you want to just email them and say, hey, I see you kind of work in this area, I'm sort of interested in this, can you tell me a little bit about your work? I mean, people are happy to communicate.
I usually encourage students who apply to grad school to students as well.
Oh, yeah.
Or the graduate student kind of representatives that might know so sort of applying, going, getting, you know, immersed in the program.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I can, if you want, if anyone's interested, I mean, I can certainly put you in touch with our, you know, some of our graduate students. And I mean, typically what we do, so right now, as I say, we sort of send out our list of candidates, or our list of offers to people, I guess, in late January, and April 15th is the big deadline when schools can legitimately say to somebody, well, either you accept our offer or we're going to offer it to someone else. So things are kind of coming to a head. I mean, we've had a few people accept, we've had a couple of people who accepted other offers. But I mean, typically, you know, we have people, like several of our candidates came to visit us on campus in the last couple of months. And yeah, I mean, I think that is, I mean, you guys are here anyway, so you're not that far away, but I do think that's an important thing for anybody. Go get the feel of the place, talk to the grad students, you know, because they will give you a more candid assessment than my carefully diplomatically presentation of our department.
So I was saying, any disciplinary program that that's really key, go visit. Sure.
Yeah, I will say, so I know Brian Leiter, you know, Leiter report on the web. I mean, well, his philosophical gourmet guide was all about, you know, how to pick the best grad program and all that kind of stuff. But I think he gives similar advice, and I think it's quite reasonable. It's like, you know, you can look at the stellar list of people on the faculty listing, but, you know, you need to talk to people on the ground to know that some people are absentees, like they're kind of there, but they're not really there, or they're not taking on students, and some people are terribly difficult to work with and all that kind of stuff. I will say, honestly, I think our people are pretty decent. So, you know, but you should probably go talk to the grad students if you're serious.
Well, I went to Kenya and I didn't know anything about cell therapy other than he wrote this awesome book called Pain and Necessity. When I got there, I was like, he was a prodigy. I didn't know that. He started at 16 and he's a unique individual. He's got his own way of being in the world. And
That's a polite way of putting it.
yeah, I'm gonna also be his assistant and have to walk him around. And
You were his assistant, like you were a teacher. Oh, okay.
And structure the class.
Okay.
Sure, he's like not telling jokes all the time. but this was that was a total surprise to me, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that he didn't sit down and write his book.
Right.
I'm sure like Donald Davidson and stuff reconstructed it and asked him if he thought it was what he said, right? So this is stuff I didn't know, but this is stuff you can find out in your first week, right? In a sense, like you can ask students about these kinds of things. It's helpful to get that perspective.
Yes.
Well, before I forget, I'm very bad about this. We are also coming down to the end of things too, and our afternoon discussions are getting pressed together. We have a Tuesday next Tuesday, me and a faith group will be doing something on faith and the environment. You get a free lunch for that. That's from 12 to 1 right here. Next Wednesday, it will be I don't know much about this. Many of you involved. Dr. Corey's class is doing sort of a living museum where they're gonna have presentations around the room and you go around and talk. I just learned about it about an hour ago, so I don't know much more. But it involves games and yeah, it looks like games and other things around the house, comic books and things like that, that religious aspect to them and how they have changed through the years.
It's for anthropology and religion. It looks like it's a material religion exhibit.
Yeah, material religion and Conway secondhand stores. So that'll be again much more hands-on. And then we've got a first of its kind Thursday afternoon discussion.
Mhm.
We've had Friday, we've had Wednesday, we've never had a Thursday before, but that'll be Dr. Hill from the anthropology department. This is the cancellation from the hurricane, the storms that came through last week and had to suspend it. So that'll be Thursday. So if you join, thank you.
Yes.
Did you guys get, I mean,